Welcome to the review of 10 Questions for Theists.
Today, we are going to be responding to Answers in Reason, which is one of my favorite atheist channels.
They're kind of like a cult, aren't they, Stephanie?
The intangible concepts that we can think of that are gods purely exist in our minds.
But just posing the question, I don't think that the intent is to commit to pretending it's true.
Because at the end of the day, it just seems like we're just making arguments from incredulity.
Hello and welcome to Answers in Reason's review of the responses we got for Questions for Theists. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And tonight we're going to be reviewing question 6. Now, in question 6, we asked, if there was one behavior you could change from your fellow believers, what would it be?
Yeah, and we had some very interesting answers to this one. Some very unique answers and some very relatable answers.
And because of that, we actually whittled it down to 4 different streams. And I think the other streams are definitely worth checking out. But tonight we're keeping it quite concise. And as Dave says, very relatable videos. And the first one that we're presenting tonight is by Triggerman.
Oh, if he knew my history, the one behavior I wish that I could get people to change is hypocrisy. That's the one behavior, because I have been hurt. I know friends who've been hurt. Hypocrisy is just, because it is so utterly destructive. Yeah. Two-facedness. That's all I can say. And it needs to change because it's so destructive to friendships, to fellowship, to everything. That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that question.
And that was Triggerman. And his answer was hypocrisy and two-facedness, because they're damaging to friendships and other relationships. Now, I'm not really sure what he means by hypocrisy, but I'm going to guess sort of telling people to behave one way while they go ahead and behave a different way. You know, a standard kind of hypocrisy, which I suppose would mean something a little bit different in the sort of Christian circles. You shouldn't be wearing linens on Sunday, and then they go and wear linen on Sunday. You know, you shouldn't steal, and they steal, all that kind of stuff. Because hypocrisy in the real world could also be a doctor telling you that smoking is damaging to your health while still smoking. And, you know, there's nothing really damaging to that hypocrisy apart from to the doctor. But he says two-facedness as well, because it's damaging to friendships and other relationships, and that's true in and out of the church.
Most definitely. And I suppose, you know, to go on from what you're saying there, he's probably talking about particular beliefs that various Christians have and various Christians promote, that they go on to not demonstrate themselves, which then calls into question those beliefs, especially if you think about those overly wealthy Christians that, you know, preach charity, but they're going around with their private jets and so on and so forth. It calls into question the validity of what they're saying, because, you know, if you're preaching charity, yet you're going around in a private jet and you've got all these fast cars and this massive house and so on and so forth, you know, really, are you the poster child for what you're actually saying? Why should anyone trust what you're saying if you're not practicing what you preach?
Yeah, I mean, another good example here is those Christian preachers who brag on about homosexuality and how it's a sin and gay conversion, and then usually get caught with a crack pipe and a meat pipe.
Yeah, it's a really good one. Yeah. closet case self-loathers, as we could call them. Yeah. So no, really, really, really good example there, Triggerman. So thank you for that one. And next tonight we have Nathan, or Digital Gnosis.
I think for me it would be the insecurity around certainty, because it seems to me that the desire to have certainty leads to a lot of tribalism. It leads to a lot of in-group, out-group behavior, where people will form kind of cliques, which stereotype people who disagree with them, which exclude the other, and become purely about, shutting up the mouth of the person who disagrees with you, or those sorts of things. And I just think that that's the complete opposite of what Christianity should be about, in my view. Whereas I think it should be about community and including the other, right? So I'd probably like to change that emphasis away from apologetics and correct doctrine, especially by those who are taking particularly epistemically risky positions around doctrine, right? And trying to make the emphasis on having certain levels of confidence around that. So that would be one thing I would change. I think there's other quite big things around the confusion of personal prejudices about moral issues with theological doctrine. Like, that's a massive issue where people confuse moral prejudices that they hold about sexuality or politics or social policies and politics, or even economic policies, and they confuse those with metaphysics and theological doctrines, right? And then they religion becomes a justificatory mechanism for those beliefs that they already just have prejudices about, and they engage in questionable practices of seeking just confirmatory passages in scripture and stuff, and loosely interpreting them to mean just what they want, and those sorts of things. And again, avoiding what I think is the core message of the religious commitments, which should be about loving the other, and not any of those sorts of things.
So that was Nathan, or Digital Gnosis, with a fantastic couple of answers there. The first was, around that general insecurity around certainty, which can lead to tribalism. So tribalism obviously is that in-group, out-group bias. It can lead to cliques and stereotypes and exclusion of people that don't fit into that stereotype. Now, we recognize this on the atheist side too, because we get it a lot from fellow atheists who don't like that we don't adhere to their particular beliefs. And we get called, crypto theists, theist trolls, and all sorts. But it happens on the other side as well. And he also says he thinks that there should actually be less focus around this whole correct doctrine and apologetics. He thinks Christianity should be inclusive, as it should be. And I think that's a really great take from him.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Like, but on both accounts, like the tribalism, you see it quite a lot in Christianity. I mean, Rev spoke about it on our stream with him, where he said he got a lot of, well, you're going to hell because of the Christian Science thing, whereas Christians are supposed to be these people, love everybody as you would love God, love your neighbors, you would love yourself. But you don't really see a lot of that. It's, if you don't follow my way, then you're an infidel.
Yeah. There is a hell of a lot of that. And it's not just Christians you see that from. It's with...
Oh, no, atheists as well.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And Muslims.
But I was just going to say...
Shia-Sunni split, yeah.
Exactly. From incredibly devout believers. You often see this kind of, you're going to hell if you don't believe as we do, or the equivalent of that sort of punishment. So yeah, but as we said, that tribalism goes everywhere. There are, I think the way he's put it there is insecurity is what fuels it. If you don't believe exactly as I do, it casts doubt on what I believe, and therefore I'm not certain I should believe what I believe, and therefore I have to other you so that I can maintain my belief. Because the fact that someone that believes a similar thing to me but doesn't believe absolutely everything I do, no, I'm going to have to push you over that way. So I mean, I think that's beautifully put, Nathan. And then you also add in something which is the confusion of personal prejudices with theological doctrine. And you talk about things like sexuality, politics, economics. And I mean, to sum it up, you're essentially saying people use religion for bigotry. They operate on various bits of confirmation bias. In fact, they perhaps interpret things in ways in such a tenuous way that it's look, it matches what I already believe to be about this type of person. And you do see that quite commonly, and you do see a lot of atheists point this out about theists doing it. And it's great to see a theist saying, no, there are other theists that do this. That it's not all of us, but there are other theists that do this, and they need to stop doing this because it's not a good behavior.
Yeah, and it's one of the great things about a few of the answers that we picked out tonight is that it is theists going, I hear you, atheists, and I agree with you.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think that's why we chose the selection that we did tonight, because there's that theme there. A lot of atheists feel unheard by theists, but they're not speaking to the right theists, clearly.
Exactly, yeah. They're just looking for the most low-hanging fruit that they can yell at and say, well, look at how bad Christianity is. Look at the people it produces. Well, here's some examples of other people that Christianity produces. People that take from the Bible to inform their beliefs rather than informing the Bible with their beliefs, like putting into the Bible what they already believe and using the Bible to justify it. Like, well, see, God hates all the same people that I do. It's funny that.
Yeah. I mean, that is a common take that atheists say, oh, look how, it just so happens that your interpretation of your holy book just matches all the things you already believe. Yeah, they're acknowledging that there are people that do that. So anyway, thank you for that, Nathan. That was beautifully put, really well thought out, and really, really, really appreciate your response. And next tonight, we have Spartan Theology and Exploring Reality.
Yeah, so actually, when I was skimming through this, I actually never saw this question. So this one, yeah.
Oh boy. I have a list.
Yeah, same.
Do you want to go first while I think
Sure.
about which one I have to pick?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I mean, I think for sure is the whole Christian nationalism, and I know that's a big thing. Especially because on Twitter, I don't know if you saw it too. There's that video going around of all those people at some mega church where are chanting "Let's go Brandon" or whatever. It's just this is. It's just that. It just makes me sick at some point. This.
I know.
Yeah, it's.
Ugh.
I think that's. If I could change anything, it would be that for sure. But yeah, there's probably more too. But that's just one that's kind of in front of your face right now.
Right. I can't stand that one. The people that there were even people that took pictures of Trump and made an Ascension of Jesus reference with Trump. It's just, I got sick of that too. I would say, okay, I guess this one doesn't hit close to home for me, but because of the realm that I work in, it's something I hear a lot, and it kind of just makes me kind of sick to my stomach to know that this happens a lot. So people that are going through doubts in their faith, the average response that they get are people telling them that they're just trying to justify their sin, pointing, like gaslighting them, all this other stuff. Like, just if you're going through doubts, you're a bad person and you should feel bad and you should not ask questions, all this other stuff. I guess I'm really kind of sick of that. And I wish people would just educate themselves a little bit more so they can actually like lovingly help somebody walk through like a deconstruction process or a questioning or doubt period, rather than just pointing the finger at them.
For sure.
Okay, and that was Spartan Theology and Exploring Reality on Spartan Theology's stream. And these are fantastic answers. Spartan Theology mentions Christian nationalism, which we've seen has been a problem. You know, like Trump kind of highlighted that problem. And he even mentions, Exploring Reality also mentions Trump, and how there's images of him ascending like Jesus. We see images of, there's that one image where Trump is at the desk and you see Jesus kind of holding him. And I think another one where it's Trump signing something and his hand merges into Trump's hand as if to signify Trump just is, Jesus is speaking through Trump. And Spartan Theology also mentions megachurches.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a bit of a hate boner for the old megachurch, don't we?
Yeah. I mean, it's entirely the opposite of kind of what you would take from Christianity if you were to look at it. There's all supposed to be all this giving to the poor, helping your community, being a good person, kind of abandoning the riches of this world for the riches of the next world. Whereas when you look at some of these Christian preachers, like you mentioned earlier, with the private jets and the flashy cars and the big mansions and the 22 swimming pools, there seems to be a huge disconnect between what I take to be Christianity and that. And I can't remember the actual name of the thing now, but it's like the more you give to the church, the more you'll get back in life because God will praise you and help you be better. And they're taking advantage of that kind of idea.
Yeah.
I just wish I'm too tired to remember the name of it now.
They're giving, and these mega churches are receiving, and that's about as much as they do. I mean, especially when you hear the things about like Joel Osteen, who's one of the worst, and how there was that plumber who found those like bags of money behind his toilet and all that. I mean, that's comically ridiculous. But this is someone who does have that sort of money, and yeah, I really, really can't stand the whole idea of the megachurch. You know, I think there are a lot of churches that actually give a lot of benefit to their community. You know, I'm not one of those atheists that is against religion or the churches. I do see some positives. They're an organization, they're an infrastructure that's already there that can do a lot of good in various areas. The megachurch doesn't really do good for the area. The megachurch does good for themselves.
Yeah. And the Christian, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, that's my problem with it.
Yeah, same. I mean, you hear that story about how there was going to be a hurricane and Joel Osteen refused to open his church so that people could have a safe place. I don't know if it's true or not, but I remember that floating around at some point. The other thing that Spartan Theology mentioned was Christian nationalism. And I find this one kind of interesting. And I asked a question on Twitter recently about, you know, is there anything in the Bible that could be considered or construed as separation of church and state, or the other way around, where Christianity is supposed to be embedded in the state? And it seems to me from the answers I've gotten from what I've read on that, the Christians weren't actually concerned about any of that, not in its original doctrine, because it was supposed to be God making Israel the head of all nations and destroying all the pagan nations. So them doing this, there seems to be, again, like the megachurches, there's this disconnect between actual Christianity and them wanting power.
Really interesting.
Yeah. And of course, I've been looking up on civil religion and studying that quite a lot recently. And Rousseau actually argued that Christianity wouldn't be a good fit for a country as a national religion, because a true Christian wouldn't really be concerned with any of that. I know you could say no true Scotsman fallacy here, but but the Christian, the Christian is more worried about spiritual matters and like being a good person and living up to what God asks of them, and they're more concerned with what's going to be happening in the next life, not this one. And in a nation, if you have a church and a government, those are two separate power structures, and usually the priest, they'll be obeying two masters, so to speak, the priests and the government. And usually the religion will come first over the government, because the priest in the church is saying what God wants, and God is above all. So Christianity, according to Rousseau, wouldn't be a good fit for a nation.
Which definitely does make sense. And you sort of see that conflict going on all the time. I mean, America is one of those places where they're supposed to have that separation of church and state, yet religion manages to squirm its way into all of the laws. You know, there's so many people enforce laws. For example, things like on abortion laws, which is one of the things that I do wonder about. Like, fair enough, right? If God says you shouldn't have an abortion, let's just say it's as simple as that. Let's just say that that's the actual commandment that goes down. Let's ignore all the passages where it seems that God has this magic potion that can make an unfaithful woman have a miscarriage and all of that. Let's just say there's a rule that God says you shouldn't have an abortion. Fine. But that shouldn't necessarily be in state law. What that should be is in your church law, and no one in your church should have one, right? That's the law that comes down from the priest. Fine. To be part of this church, you shouldn't have an abortion. But you know what? By a state law, it's perfectly allowed. It's perfectly legal. We're not going to step in anyone's way for doing it. If they want to sin, that's fine. It's not illegal. It's a perfectly safe medical procedure, right? I mean, let's face it, the fetus is going to go straight to heaven. It's not their fault. It's going to be the mother and other people involved in that practice that are going to go to hell or whatever. So forget about that, right? That's not your problem. Think about the fact that your congregation should be the ones that uphold God's law, but the law of the land should not necessarily reflect God's law. You uphold God's law. And I think that's one of the big problems, is expecting this godly law to be enforced by your government. And when it's not enforced by your government, just trying to enforce it anyway by doing things like bombing abortion clinics and all that sort of thing. I mean, it's awful. It's awful. Yeah, because we respect life so much, we're going to kill people.
Yeah. What? Well, another interesting thing that came from that conversation that I had on Twitter, and I got the information from people far smarter than I am, far more informed, because, you know, I don't really know that much about the Bible. But there's the passage, render unto Caesar what Caesar is due, and there's also another passage that kind of speaks of when you're in another country, obey their laws. Because if if they're in power, they must have been put there by God, because God is in control of all things. So there's these statements saying, obey the laws of the land, because eventually, like I said, God was supposed to come in and destroy all these pagan nations and install kind of good believers, and Israel is the head of the world and the light of the world. So all these Christians who were doing this and like bombing abortion clinics or kind of getting in the way of laws, they're actually going against what the Bible says.
Though many Christians go against many biblical laws for
This can kind of speak back to Triggerman and his hypocrisy.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think that's part of the problem as well. Many Christians don't even realize they're being hypocritical. I think it's safe to say that atheists quite often overestimate their knowledge of the Bible, right?
Yeah.
I think so many of us atheists think we know more than we do. And doing these streams has helped me highlight that, you know what, even though I grew up as a Christian and everything like that, there is a hell of a lot that I don't know about the Bible and different forms of Christianity. But I think the same can be said for Christians. So many Christians don't have a particularly great understanding of the Bible. They just get fed what their particular religious leader, tells them. And they probably haven't read the Bible or taken a greater understanding of the Bible. They might have read certain passages and interpreted it in certain ways, but not taken the time to actually explore things further, which again has led to this hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And there was the last bit that Exploring Reality said as well.
This is a beautiful one, yeah.
Which was people going through doubts get told they are trying to justify their sin.
Yeah, and we hear that a lot, I mean, this is one of the ones, when Braxton did his kind of 10 questions thing, this is the one that I kind of called out. Because he said, can you see why people say these things? And here we have Exploring Reality saying, stop doing that. He's actually agreeing with atheists here and saying, the religious shouldn't be doing this. This isn't the way forward. What should be happening is there should be help while people are deconstructing. I mean, I suppose you can kind of help them stay in Christianity, I guess. But you can also help them deconstruct in a much better way if you're religious. Because a lot of atheists are just, okay, you don't believe now. Yeah, that's good enough. Rather than, here's things to learn, here's ways to look at it, blah, 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 blah. Nobody actually kind of helps these people and leaves them in this kind of wilderness.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that people who are doubting their religion, finding problems with, the Bible or particular passages or certain lessons that they've learned in church or whatever it is, are going, I just really don't get this. I need some help understanding this. And I don't understand why God would put us on this earth or give us these challenges or allow these teleological evils or so on and so forth. And someone turns around and goes, you're just trying to justify that you want to sin. How is that an answer for any of their concerns? And that's going to make that person who's starting to have those doubts turn around and go, well, no, that's not what I'm doing. Do you not have an answer for me? If you don't have an answer for me, maybe there is no answer. And because there's no answer, the answer actually is there's no God.
Yeah.
You're pushing
or
those
there's no
people
good reason
away.
to believe.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is why I kind of like Randall Rouser, because he sort of gets into this kind of stuff and he's just such a nice guy when he's doing it. He kind of, I guess he kind of understands this a bit more than others. I don't know.
No, he's a good guy. like most of the people we've had on all of our videos, I have to say I've really enjoyed reviewing the answers of all the folks that we've had on both the theist and atheist sides. You know, there's been a number of great answers so far, and it's really encouraging to see that there are other theists that realize that this sort of thing goes on. And it's, how do we get these sort of things to be realized, both by theists and non-theists? You know, that theists are aware that this happens, you know, so atheists can't just point a finger and go, oh, you're just doing this. Yeah, do you know what? Some theists realize that they're doing it, but also those theists that do act this particular way can realize it's not the best way to act, and their behaviors are actually having a negative reaction. And I can imagine if they were particularly selfish, well, I don't care, it's not me going to hell. Do you think God would, if he exists, which you believe he does, would be happy with you pushing people away from him, pushing people away from his flock? You've essentially caused these people to no longer believe in him. Yeah, you do, great. But you know what? You've pushed so many people away from him, you're going down there too.
Yeah.
And the last one tonight was from Yovany, who provided, again, another unique answer.
What would you want? Okay. So if there was a thing I could change about my believers, or one thing I could change about my fellow believers, what would it be and why? Some believers act like Pharisees, really, and they puff up their chests and they act all holier than thou, and then they lack the empathy to really dialogue with the people, with people who are different from them, and I don't like that. And they'll say it's tough love, but tough love to them, it's like kind of an excuse to be a jerk, really. What else? Sometimes they can act a bit Pharisee-like, as in like they add traditions. So like, oh, you're not married at this age, you should be married at, like, I don't know, 22. Like they believe in courtship, or like rather, oh yeah, you need to dress a certain way because you're not being a man. Like they're adding man-made traditions to this stuff, and I don't like it.
So that was Yovany, who mentions there are theists that basically act like they're Pharisees. They're arrogant, and they make things like excuses like it's tough love, but he thinks it's just an excuse to be a jerk. And there's expectations of various traditions or dress codes, and a lot of them are actually man-made rather than from the Bible itself.
Yeah, and it's a pretty interesting take as well, because we see atheists complaining about this as well. You know, like Christians are just jerks. All they do is scream at you that you're going to hell. And I suppose within the Christian church itself, and between all the different denominations, again, going back to Rev's stream with us recently, he talked about how they would do that to him. He got put down more, or he saw more putting down from other Christians than he did from atheists.
Yeah, and that was the really interesting one for us as well, is the fact that the non-believers were generally, at least where he was, were left more alone than he was as a Christian Scientist who was not a real Christian and going to hell for being not a real Christian. It's like you're not saying the same things as us other Christians are, so therefore you're the problem. But I think we can also swing it back to the fact that we can also say that there are certain atheists that act in a similar way as well. You know.
Yeah, the ridiculous beliefs deserve ridicule, so therefore I'm going to ridicule them to help them see the light. But really, all they're doing is kind of bullying them. They're not. It's not just general mockery. It's some of it's quite vicious.
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, that side, this sort of behavior ties into Nathan's point about the tribalism, because when you've got groups acting in such arrogant ways, such tribalistic ways, you're going to have this animosity. You're not going to have these good conversations, and you're going to have these cliques forming. You're going to have stereotypes about the others. You're going to have this exclusivity going on. You're going to have these arguments between the tribes, and it's not healthy for conversation. And what we see online from both sides, especially the what we might call about the low hanging fruits of both sides of the theological debate, is this arrogant jerk like behavior where they're just insulting each other and basically calling out stereotypes of each other and excluding each other and telling each other they don't know what they're talking about, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And I quite like Yovany's discussion about traditions. You should be married by a certain age. You should be dressed a certain way. There's all these expectations of how you ought to behave that aren't necessarily rooted in the Bible, but probably more rooted in conservatism.
Mm-hmm. And it just so happens to be that in America, where a lot of the Christians that we've spoken to recently are from, Christianity tends to be quite conservative. Now, not all Christians are conservative in America, but generally the loudest and proudest Christians tend to be on the conservative side, which is why there is that correlation there. It's not a causation, it's a correlation. And
Yeah.
that's why you seem to see these sort of expectations Yovany is talking about from Christians, with these other expectations of the way you should dress and when you should be married and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it was a short answer, but there was quite a lot of nuance in it, and stuff that can be pulled out of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I really enjoyed it. Like I enjoyed all the answers tonight. And again, I think the answers tonight have showed that there is more awareness, and there is more openness to the conversation and to the flaws of their fellow believers than many atheists would like to present. There is this
Absolutely.
attitude from other atheists that theists all think they're perfect because they have the belief in God and so on and so forth. Well, here are some folks who clearly demonstrate that there are problems within Christianity, there are behaviors that they would like to change. And, I really appreciate this look. And some of these are in accord with a lot of atheists bring up as well. So perhaps we can go from there and we can have more conversations about this sort of thing and how we can make things a little bit better.
And perhaps some atheists can learn from this that not all theists are enemies. That, there are ones who understand what, the things that we think, or understand the arguments that we make and agree with them. So why treat them as an enemy? Why aren't we kind of allying with them and getting those points across?
Completely agree. Completely agree. So thank you tonight to Triggerman, Nathan or Digital Gnosis, Spartan Theology, Exploring Reality, and Yovany. Also, thank you to everyone else who has sent a video or a written response in as well. I do apologize that you didn't get included in this video. But I would also like to say we've actually had some more videos coming in recently. So it might be that we're going to do a wave 2 of responses as well. So keep those videos coming in, because we would very much like to cover it off, especially if you have a non-Christian position, because, if you're a Muslim or some form of polytheist or something out there like a pantheist, then we are going to have a lot more to discuss about your position that hasn't been discussed in the last videos. So keep the videos coming in. We love them. We love hearing from you, and we really appreciate them. And thank you everybody who has been tuning in tonight on the premiere, or anyone who has watched the rerun. We really appreciate all of you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So you've been watching Answers in Reason's review of the 10 questions for theists. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
Have a good night, all.
Good night.